views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we do encourage you to like and share them on Facebook because it's time for the Sue Ellen Sanders Show with Sue Ellen Sanders.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today, and we're observing social distancing to the extreme because, as you can see, my guest here is a stuffed puppy. I don't think the puppy has a name, and he actually does not talk either. He's just a stand-in today for my real guest who is participating on the phone, and that's Ann Posey. And Ann is a licensed mental health counselor, and she is the assistant administrator for the Behavioral Health Center at Cleveland Clinic, Indian River Hospital. That's a mouthful.
It is. Thank you,
Ann, thanks for joining us. And those of you who've been listening to my show for the last 20 years, Ann has probably been one of my most frequent guests because whenever there is an issue that I hear people dealing with or I am dealing with personally, I ask Ann to step in and give us some hints and some strategies. And right now, you know, everybody's talking about COVID-19 and everybody's talking about coronavirus. And it is an unpredictable, kind of scary time to be around.
It is.
So, Ann, everybody's had probably more than a few sleepless nights, and everybody's patterns changed and work habits, or they may have lost a job, or their job may have changed, or they may be dealing with other extra issues. They may be older, they may be very young and not understand why mom and dad are freaking out. But we're going to kind of get some strategies of how to deal with issues around the mental health aspects of not just fear of something that we don't know about, a virus in our midst, but also the whole social distancing thing for people who are not used to not being around people.
So I think everybody's dealing with it, Sue Ellen, and one of the things is that it's a normal response to an abnormal situation.
Well, it's not like anything that any of us have ever lived through before.
Right, and we often feel like that we should be coping better, right? That we aren't allowed to have unpleasant emotions or feel bad. But that's normal to be anxious and afraid, even feel helpless or overwhelmed when we're dealing with some kind of trauma like this.
So if it's normal, how do we cope? One of my favorite sayings has always been the quote about dealing with the things that you can change and ignoring the things that you can't change and knowing the difference between the two.
Right, the
Serenity Prayer, which was a lovely paraphrase here on my part. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think that is actually really good advice. So I try to encourage people to stay in the moment because you can only deal with what's going on in the moment. We can imagine all the things that could happen. They may or may not happen, but we can deal with what's going on right now.
Okay, and just for the record, the Serenity Prayer is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right, and I love a quote by Mark Twain that is, I'm an old man, I've had many worries, many of which never came true.
And that's very very true too, because, for one thing, both Ann and I are moms, and moms have an exceptional ability to worry, and to worry about the smallest things, and to worry about the big things too. But, it's something that, of all the things that I've laid awake worrying about over the years of my life, such a small percentage of those things have ever happened, except for I was bleary-eyed the next day and from lack of sleep, and I was stressing about something that didn't happen. So you can't predict what's going to happen. You can only move forward and stay safe. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're also going to talk about ways to cope, talk about, Ann, you're in the midst of, being at Cleveland Clinic, Indian River Hospital. You're in the midst of the hubbub of what's happening, and you probably see a lot of people who are very stressed every day, in and out of the parking lot of the location there. But I think really in just about everywhere you go nowadays, you kind of see people who, what's the thing is, should you watch the news? Should you not watch the news? Should you read everything you can? Should you put your head in the sand?
So, I think that everything in moderation. So obviously we don't want to put our head in the sand because we do want to know what's going on, but excessive coverage and media coverage probably isn't healthy. We don't do that normally on our day-to-day business. So I think limit the time, get the information that you need, and then remind yourself that strong feelings will fade, right? So you can take breaks from watching, reading, and listening to news stories and try to intersperse it with things you enjoy.
And enter Netflix and Hulu and all of those wonderful shows that we can stream and binge watch and go into another world. And I've seen a lot of that online. I've seen a lot of people, more than usual, sharing, and saying, what shows should I watch? And they're not looking for shows that are giving them a lot of facts and figures. They're looking for shows that will make them distract them, think about something
Correct.
Else.
And I think that's healthy. I mean, we don't want to sit all day on the couch just binging, on shows for days on end. But we always wonder, wow, I wish I had time to do some of those things. See it as a little bit of a gift. We have some time now to do all those things we wish we had time to do.
And, that's one way of looking at it, is to look at the gift of time instead of looking at the punishment of staying at home if you're somebody that has to stay at home.
Well, and if you can reframe it, that it's not a punishment to stay home. We're actually helping to save our communities, and we're actually doing something that's extremely positive. And it's something that we are doing to help the greater good.
Well, we already know that the virus is contagious, but isn't it also true that the fear is contagious?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that for a minute. How do we deal with that? So
again, I think anytime you are doing something excessively, it's good for you. So if all we're talking about is the COVID situation and that's our entire focus, then we're just kind of spinning. And so I think it's important to look at other topics we can talk about, even if it's talking about that show I watched on Netflix.
The Tiger one?
To have a schedule, try to have a routine, do things that'll distract you.
And they're TV is not the only thing. There's a lot of books you can read. My daughter the other day came up with the idea with her friends of a virtual book club, and
cool.
There's like 10 of them that all ordered a book and then read it, and they're using Zoom to discuss the book. And they also
go ahead. I'm sorry.
They also are on regular. There's different groups of people who are having Zoom happy hours.
So I saw an article where it talked about making a list of everything you normally do during the week. So what is your normal schedule? Do you have book club? Do you have choir practice? Do you go to craft class? And then look for ways to continue to do those things, but do them virtually.
And, lucky for us, when you're looking on the lists of lucky things, that we are now living in a world where doing things virtually is easier than ever before. From anything from having a meeting with your management team to, like I said, a virtual book club or a virtual happy hour. But press conferences, you can have virtual press conferences. You can have opportunity for people to spend time together. Or, I saw somebody was talking about the other day, they're cleaning their house. They're doing one room at a time. I mean, that's not a fun activity for me. I don't know about you.
No, but I think that's really important. All those to-do lists that we always have of things we want to get done but never have time to, this is a great time to get those done.
And there's ways to, the other thing that I saw somebody post is the comment of, now that I've been saying for years I'm going to clean my house, and now that I have time, I realized it wasn't the time that was needed.
Right. And humor, I will say humor is a great way to cope during all of this. The memes that are out there right now are very entertaining.
They are, but at the same time, I'm also hearing people and seeing people say, this is not a laughing matter. So how do you know when it's okay to make a joke and who it's okay to make a joke to?
Well, I don't know that you'll always be 100% perfect with that, but I think looking at the lighter side of things, it's the way we've survived a lot of things. So if we've all been through very tough things before. So if we think back, I remember 9/11 and how difficult a time that was, and that there was a time where we thought we would never get through that, but we did. And I believe the same with this, and that if we're making jokes that are in good fun and aren't demeaning or anything like that, most of the time people will be okay with it. There may be times where they aren't, but we're not perfect, right?
We're not perfect. It's true, but at the same time, you live and learn, and we're kind of writing a playbook. And I'm wondering when we get through this, and we will get through this, then the next time something of this nature comes up, everybody will know how to handle it better. Hopefully it won't be within the next 60 years. And people are talking about the 1918 flu epidemic, or is it 1912? It was 100 years ago, so maybe it'll be another 100 years. We've taken such steps in immunization and in cleanliness and in scientific knowledge that I really thought something like this happening would just be kind of science fiction. And I see other people feeling that, thinking that. And to them, thinking that it's science fiction might be easier than dealing with the reality of it. I don't know. So people who are still working, there's a lot of stress that they're dealing with. The people, especially that are the emergency responders and the nurses and doctors and other healthcare workers, child care workers, grocery store clerks. They're in a situation where they have a lot of stress because they are dealing with other people's stress as well. How do they go home to their families and not scare their kids?
Well, I mean, I think that, again, we need to take care of our own well-being and our own mental health. So we need to watch for areas of concern. If we're not sleeping well, we're not eating well, we have difficulty concentrating, we're having an increased use of drugs or alcohol, we need to pay attention to it. I always say our symptoms are our friends. They give us information. So we want to make time for ourselves. I would say that for those feeling anxious and stressed when they come home, saying to their family, I need maybe 15 minutes. I want to go in, get a shower, kind of leave the day behind, and then I'll be with you. Connect with others, but try to remember that we want to maintain a sense of hope. We've been through difficult times before. We can get through them again. I mean, if you want to talk specifically about what we can do with children, did you want me to talk about that?
Let's talk a little bit about the children, too, because a lot of them now are dealing with an additional stressor of their own in that, they're trying to learn how to learn virtually. And that may be something that's got them stressed, too. So there are a lot of changes in their lives too, and they, how much news do you want them to have depending on what age?
So again, kids are pretty resilient. So I remember the storms in 2004. Kids were out of school for an extended period of time. They were able to adapt to it, maybe sometimes a little better than the parent.
Yeah.
But you want to kind of follow your child's lead. So some kids may want to talk about it. Other kids might not seem interested or ask a lot of questions, and that's okay. So just help them feel safe, be truthful, but answer on their age level. So, you probably don't want a 6-year-old watching the news for 2 hours. But an older child you may want to watch the news with them, with your adolescent, and then answer questions or talk about how they're feeling.
Even for an adult, I think 2 hours is a little bit excessive to be watching it every night. I know in my house, I actually had to tell my husband, who was watching the news from like 5 o'clock to moving on to one show or another till 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night. And I finally had to say, I'm not sleeping at night, so we're going to get through the news. You can watch whatever news you want. If you want to go in another room and continue watching the news, that's fine. But I would like to sleep at night, so at a certain point of time, I'm going to start watching mindless romantic comedies.
And that's absolutely healthy, because different people have different tolerances.
And the same for our kids too, though. Maybe right before bed is not the time to answer their questions about what a dangerous world we might live in.
But I think also put it in context. So, yes, this is a rare event, but when you look at the United States as a whole, more people are healthy than are sick. And I think we need to remind them of that.
So let's talk a little bit about strategies for those who are feeling that the whole social distance, stay at home thing is creating even more depression in their lives. What are some of the ways that they can counteract? Because it's not going to be over anytime real soon. And I think, too, that maybe I definitely know that's the unpredictability is what's got some people thrown. With the hurricanes, we were able to say, okay, as soon as the hurricane passes, we can go back out again, or, as soon as the danger of the approaching storm passes. So we had a finite period of time that we needed to work toward, but this is not.
Well, but I think if we actually put that in perspective, so in 2004, we had a great period of time where we had a lot of hurricanes that were pretty devastating and was not like anything we had seen in my lifetime. And I was disrupted for almost a year following those storms. So, but was able to get through it and adjust my lifestyle. And I think it's the same with this. We don't know how long it's going to be, but we've been through difficult times before, and we'll be able to get through this as well. And we need to remind ourselves of that.
One thing, we generally, when we talk mental health, we talk about healthy diets, and we also talk about exercise. And a lot of us are not used to getting to not being able to go to the gym, to not being able to spend time meeting our friends, to bicycle or run or whatever we do. And that's a change. It's kind of a double whammy, because it's a change up in our schedule, but it also, we're missing those feel good endorphins that are coming at us from the exercise.
But there's no reason for us not to do those things, and it does require a little more discipline. But we, with Netflix and YouTube, you can get a workout. You can do that virtually. You can run outside. You can ride a bike outside. You just maybe can't do it with your friend. You can listen to a book on tape while you run, or I guess it's not tape anymore.
Audio book, yes.
Audio book. We can eat and drink wisely. I mean, we can do that. We could maybe we could look up healthy recipes and try cooking. Cooking a recipe that we've never made before that's a little healthier. Remember, 60 years ago, we didn't have gyms and, things like that. So, again, I think it's a change, but change isn't always bad. Maybe, we'll find some activities that we like that are outside and save some money in the future.
Well, the whole saving money thing, too, is, part of the stress is that, many people are in a position where their financial security has changed, whether it's because they have savings that are in their retirement savings, or whether they've lost their job, or whether their job has just changed, but they're not going to be making as much money, or they don't know if they're going to have their job next week. People like restaurant workers and store clerks at clothing stores. You see a lot of people, a lot of businesses trying to move, restaurants to takeout, the stores to, pushing shopping online, which was my favorite way to shop anyhow. one of my other favorite sayings is, "What do you say when you're depressed?" And the answer is, "Add to cart."
Well, I think, again, so I'm a big believer that I can manage anything if I have a plan. And if I have a plan, I may never have to use it, but I at least feel like I have a little bit more control than if I just sit and worry about what might happen. So when we get into the anxiety mode of what if, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this other thing happens? A good counter is, so what can I do? So perhaps right now is not the time to add to cart because we don't know how long this is going to last or what's going to happen. We also need to have some acceptance that this is kind of an unprecedented time. I mean, there's nothing we could have done to prepare for this, I don't believe. And I think everybody's in that mode. So it's happened. What can we do? I don't go in and look at my retirement accounts right now. It's not healthy for me. So, it's just not something that I do.
Well, and bottom line, they're going to fluctuate, but eventually they're going to come back. And so checking while it's going on is probably not a healthy attitude to have.
Correct. And it's not really the time right now, so maybe risk take financially. This is probably the time to, think about what is it I need and what are the basics and let's think about today and what I can do today and what I need to do for the next 30 days, and let's see where we are. I mean, I will say that I think the country as a whole has just pulled together, and that's really gratifying to see.
I'm glad you brought that up because, especially right after 9/11, we had everybody holding doors for everybody else and being nice and being kind, and that lasted maybe a week or two. So hopefully we'll have that type of attitude, not necessarily holding doors for each other, but in a different way to take the time to be kind. And, if you still have a job and you're able to work from home and you're able to access perhaps takeout food, being able to get takeout food from your favorite restaurant, because one of the things that I've been reading, and I know I said we weren't going to talk about anything health related other than mental health related, but I've heard that if you get hot takeout food, that it's safer because, of course, when you cook it, you kind of disinfect it.
So that's a little out of my level of expertise. But I do think the idea of some random acts of kindness.
Okay.
So recognizing that we're part of a bigger community, and if I can do something for someone else, it kind of takes me out of my moment of worry. So, I've brought some toilet paper in to people because I have some toilet paper and other people don't. So if and that little thing I can tell you was my coworker was very grateful for that, and I felt positive. You see on the news people reaching out with gratitude towards healthcare workers. I will tell you as a healthcare worker how meaningful that is, and those things don't cost money.
Well, the video that I have seen of, and I think it's in New York City, of the people when the shift changes at 9 o'clock at night outside the hospital, and they're all honking and waving and cheering for the healthcare workers as they change their shifts. Have you seen that?
I have, and I think it's amazing.
And that's something that doesn't cost them anything, and that doesn't make them unsafe. They're still staying at home. They're still safe inside. They're just expressing their appreciation. And, we all have computers or some kind of computer type electronic device. We all have phones, so it's easier to stay connected to other people. So hopefully what will come out of this will be continued thinking about other people and a kindness toward other people. This actually, I was getting ready to walk out the door to come to the radio station, and I realized that the new book that I had received, Chicken Soup book, which is called 101 Feel-Good Stories, Laughter is the Best Medicine. I had just received some advance copies of the book because it'll be in stores in mid-April, and not just in stores, of course, available online. It's the latest of the Chicken Soup books, but it's just timely because it's 101 Reasons to Laugh Out Loud. And something like that, reading something like that, something that doesn't relate to anything except for somebody else's reason to laugh out loud, is something short. And actually, I do have a story that's published in this one too.
Oh, congratulations!
So, yeah, it's a story about and the little stories that we tell about things that were funny that happened to us. And this was a story about my wedding night, actually, when I came home to drop the gifts off, and my dog at the time had gotten out, and I was in my wedding gown, and my husband was in his tuxedo, and it was pouring down rain. And she got out of the house, and it was like midnight, and I was running around the neighborhood calling for her, and so was my husband, but the dog's name happened to be Honey.
I think I remember this story.
Yeah, I'm sure I've told it to you before. So here we are on my wedding night, running around calling Honey, Honey, in my wedding gown, and I'm sure those neighbors in my house in Lake Worth to this day probably are still shaking their heads, worried about that bride who had lost her groom on her wedding night. And so I was reading some of the other stories that were in the book, and there's 100 other stories in there, and they're all kind of silly, funny, embarrassing little things that we can laugh out loud together. And that kind of thing is probably something that's healthy for us to do. But
so I would agree. I try when I'm looking at my social media. So I see sometimes a lot of doom and gloom stories, which, I mean, I'm not saying aren't, there isn't some doom and gloom going on, but I try to look more at the stories of hope and the stories where people have done great things, and those kind of things give me, just a sense of hope, which I feel like I need during this time.
Well, at the same time, it's good to change the subject, to talk to our family about other things, to share the stories of hope instead of the stories of sadness. But at the same time, it's important to do all that we can, to stay safe, to stay sane, and to keep the others grounded around us too. And if you're somebody, maybe who doesn't feel like you do a really good job in doing that, are there resources that people can turn to kind of give them ideas of how to deal with different types of situations?
There are absolutely resources. So a lot of the mental health resources that are out there normally that people can walk into, or can, normally would have gone, are doing sessions by either telehealth or by phone. There's been a lot of loosening of restrictions around those things. So I think that all of the local providers are doing their best to be available to the community. I think that, you know, there are crisis lines. I know the 211 hotline is a really great resource and can connect people, you know, with resources. You know, different counties have different things, so sometimes that's a very good place to start.
211 is a great resource as a place to start to get information of what you need. And, you know, some of the takeaways from this, you know, what a tutorial on how to wash your hands the last month has been. And who knew how many times we touched our face until we tried not to. So, you know, there are some takeaways. There are also, I think that, you know, what you do that's good is going to be something that people remember far longer than what people who say negative things or mean things will remember. I think the good is what people remember and hopefully will. As far as when we're talking, I know there's a lot of telework and tele-resources, but there's also, I'm assuming that Indian River Hospital, Cleveland Clinic in Indian River Hospital has resources that are online that are kind of self-help.
Absolutely. You know, you can certainly go to the Cleveland Clinic web page, and there's great information there. You know, I think during this time, you know, the things that we can learn during this time are things that are going to help us every day, right? So we need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be kind to the people around us. We need to stay in the moment. You know, all those things that we're going to learn are going to serve us well in the future. And, you know, I think we need to remember we will have a future and it will be a positive one.
So as far as, you know, dealing with adults, you know, be kind, look toward the future, and not stress about the things that you can't change or the people you can't change.
Well, and I think that saying don't stress about it, so it's normal to stress. So a lot of times beat ourselves up for having negative feelings, which it's pretty normal to have those feelings.
Which is very self-defeating, isn't it?
Right. You feel bad for feeling bad. So I think that recognizing it's a normal feeling, and again, if I feel this way, what are some things that I can do? And to have those strategies, you know, even if you have to make a list. So if I'm feeling depressed or anxious, these are things I can do. I can take a walk by myself. I can read a book. I can watch a show on Netflix. I can call my good friend and talk to her on the phone or by video chat. So have those
or talk
available.
To her on a radio show.
Absolutely.
And you know, if you have, I love your idea of making the list, because sometimes when you're really upset, you're not thinking clearly. And if you have that list, maybe even put it on your refrigerator so you can see it, and to remind yourself of that these are
I can
things.
Deal with anything if I have a plan. So this is my plan, and have it written out.
You know, I know that the tendency for people to, you know, there's people that have different things that calm them down, that have different things that are their coping mechanisms. And for some of us, that coping mechanism might be food, or it could be alcohol. Do you have any suggestions for someone who might be overdoing those coping mechanisms?
Well, I think, again, reach out to those resources that are available, because they are out there. To remind ourselves everything in moderation. So if this isn't something we normally do, and we find ourselves doing it more often, and it's unhealthy, we will want to take a look at that. you know, in your list. You know, you want to have all those healthy things. And I'm not saying people should never have a drink or they should never have, you know, that
brownies,
ice cream cone, right? But again, in moderation, because we know that if we take care of ourselves, we're going to be more resilient and we're going to feel better.
So how about those people who like wake up in the morning and count their blessings or think about all the things they're thankful for before they go to sleep at night?
I think that's an amazing strategy. And, you know, we haven't talked about faith and you know, having faith that life is going to work out as it should can be very positive. You know, a lot of people are missing, you know, their faith-based activities right now. But again, you can do a lot of those virtually. You know, I know a lot of the churches are offering services online and different things. And I think sometimes we're resistant to try those because they're outside of what we're comfortable with. But we might find it's something that's really helpful. But I do think, you know, recognizing what am I thankful for today is a really good strategy.
And what am I thankful for or what was I grateful for that happened today? Because one of the things that I've been thinking about every day, and I have a friend that keeps talking about how beautiful the weather is. Because, yeah, we're kind of wanting a little bit of rain too, but the weather really has been beautiful spring, almost summer-like conditions. So, you know, maybe that's something to be grateful to, that we're not in really terribly humid, the worst of the summer type of situations, or we're not, for the people who are up north, that it's not the most cold and frigid of times either.
Right. I think we have a great deal to be thankful for. I think, you know, I'm thankful that people are working together to be socially distanced to flatten our curve. You know, being in healthcare, that's really important to me. So, you know, I'm very grateful and thankful for that. You know, I'm thankful that my daughter in Colorado is able to work from home, you know, and that she is able to do that. So we need to remember that, you know, so I like the phrase, this too shall pass. In life, we're faced with a lot of difficult times, and what we know is that this too shall pass.
You know, you mentioned faith, and you mentioned the fact that, you know, some people might be missing not just that Sunday morning ritual of going to church, but being around other people and then listening to a woman or a man of God talk to you. But there are ways that during the week, even, you know, you can, I've heard people talk about, you know, reading something from their Bible, whatever their Bible might be. I have a friend too whose Bible is kind of the book about Mr. Rogers. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's all filled with things that Mr. Rogers said in his neighborhood. So it's, you know, not a religious book. It's more of a contemporary thinking about things that, like the things that you learn in kindergarten that are things that you bring with you the rest of your life. The lessons that you're learning are the lessons that, you know, are still helpful to you when you're 20, 30, 40, 50.
Well, I'm a big fan of motivational speakers too, so I love TED Talks, and a lot of times I'll look at those as positive inspiration.
And that's a great idea, too, because those are very easily accessible and they're free as well. And, you're talking about you may not know the things that you really wanted to do. I've heard some people talk about, taking some online classes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're not any type of degree seeking, they could be learning a new language or taking time to learn more about their craft, whether it be engineering or writing or psychology. But
what's that list of all those things we wish we had time to do? We actually have some time now.
We do, but cleaning the house isn't one of them. Although I think if you take small bites with that, even the tasks that are things you were always meaning to do, but you really don't even want to do, that if you have a day where you're doing some work from home and then you also, while you're listening to a conference call, you're riding the exercise bike or, you are cleaning out your closet or doing something, any little thing makes a difference, and then you kind of feel better when it's done.
Well, so make your procrastination list, right? So these are the things I've been procrastinating doing, and make a list, and then, like you said, a small bite at a time.
So some things you enjoy, some things you always wanted to get to, maybe some things that you really don't want to get to, but now you have the time and you feel like it
needs to be done.
Yeah, it needs to be done. And it's kind of, you wonder about people who are, they've been around a long time and they've seen a lot of different things, but they've never seen something like this. And what they're going to remember compared to the kids that are staying at home now and learning virtually at school and hanging with their family, what they're going to remember, their set of memories is probably going to be a whole lot more positive.
Well, and when we think back on hard times, again, a lot of times what we do remember are the positives that came out of it.
And if you have a family of kids that are home, and they're looking back when they're grown and looking back at this time, they're probably going to remember the times sitting around the dinner table or helping mom or dad in the kitchen or planting a garden. Because there's like you said, you remember the good things. So those are the things that stick in your mind. And, as time passes, the things that were not so good kind of fade away. So basically, to sum it all up, one of the big takeaways for me here from this show is that it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be not feeling good about everything that's going on in your life. But
right, you need to normalize your feelings. We often, like you said, we feel bad about feeling bad, but we're not robots. We are entitled to feel bad, but we can also challenge our hopelessness. We can take this seriously. We need to take this seriously, but we also can look at the fact that it's getting better in other places around the world. It will get better here, and we will get through it. This too shall pass.
And that there's a purpose in our social distancing, and there's a purpose to our working from home, and that
we're helping the greater good.
We are, and everybody is in this together. So, what are some other takeaways that you would hope that people take away from this show, Anne?
Well, I just want to encourage people to take care of themselves. Make sure that you're practicing as much good health as you can. Get enough rest. Try to eat healthy. get exercise in whatever way that you can. Challenge those negative feelings that you that can get you into, kind of the rut of anxiety. Develop a plan, connect with your loved ones, be kind to each other. All those things are going to get us through this difficult time.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. Ann Posey is a licensed mental health counselor, and she is also the assistant administrator with the Behavioral Health Center at Cleveland Clinic, Indian River Hospital. Thanks for joining me out for the show today, and I hope to see everybody next week or talk to you next week.
Thank you for having me, Sue Ellen.
The Sue Ellen Sanders Show, weekends on WPSL. See the schedule at WPSL.com and watch the archives on WPSLTV.com.